have a mover and a seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillor Chapman and Councillor Moore. That the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of January 23rd, 2019 come to order at 6:37 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem led by Deputy Mayor Coghlan.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you for attending and for tuning in, if you're tuning in. And before we start, are there any disclosures of a pecuniary interest, Council? Seeing none, if any arise, please let us know at the time. We'll start with the public meeting. And may I have a mover and a seconder to call the public meeting to order? Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Cabral, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That this public meeting of Council under Section 34 of the Planning Act for the ZB 218-010 by Nunzio Delice on behalf of Carmelina, Giuseppe, Maria, and Mark Delice be called to order at 6:39 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Welcome to this public meeting of Springwater Township Council held in compliance with Section 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to a proposed amendment to the Township of Springwater zoning bylaw 5000 as amended. The first part of this meeting is to present the amendment. Following that, an opportunity will be given to enable those who have any comments, concerns, or inquiries with regard to this proposal to make their views known to Council. In addition to any comments made at this meeting, written presentations are welcome by the Council. If a person or a public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township at Springwater in respect of a proposed zoning bylaw amendment does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions to the Township of Springwater before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed, the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. Any persons who wish to speak should come to speak at the front desk and first give their name and address. All comments or questions should be addressed through myself as chair. Oral submissions will form part of the public meeting minutes record, including the name and address of the speaker, as information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted on the Township website. So tonight we are dealing with ZB 218-010 by N. Delice at 2293 North Orlake Road. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates on which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 14th day of December 2018 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 16 properties in the Township of Springwater within 120 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was also posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies, at a location that was visible from North Orlake Road. The notice was also placed on the Township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of the public meeting?
Correspondence was received from the Simcoe County District School Board stating no objection, the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority stating no objection and that a permit under the Conservation Authorities Act had been issued for the dwelling, and from Enbridge stating that they do not have any objection to the proposed application.
I now call upon Deborah Ann Lisk, Township Planner, to give a brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application 2018-010 is an application to amend the zoning of the property located at 2293 North Ore Lake Road. The property is currently zoned residential conversion hold and currently has a seasonal dwelling on the property. The applicant wishes to construct a permanent dwelling for year-round use. In order to do so, the applicant is required to remove the holding provision from the lands as well as amend the zoning of the property for some site-specific lot deficiencies that are being requested by the applicant. These deficiencies are deficient lot area, a reduction in the interior side yard setbacks, and an increase in the total lot coverage permitted on the property. Staff will be bringing forward a recommendation report in a later council meeting with the bylaw. That concludes my comments at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon any members of the public wishing to ask questions or make comments regarding this application. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address. There don't appear to be any, so I turn to members of council. Do you have any questions or comments regarding this application? Okay. Thank you for attending the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and showing an interest in the matter. May I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn the public meeting? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Cabral. That this meeting held under Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 P13, as amended on a zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2018-010 by Nunzio Delice on behalf of Camelina, Giuseppe, Maria, and Mark Delice. It does now adjourn at 6:44 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive direction following the public meeting? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Ritchie. The council, having held a public meeting in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 P13, as amended on a zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 218-010 by Nunzio Delice on behalf of Carmelina, Giuseppe, Maria, and Mark Delice, having noted correspondence and input received, direct, and I believe you're directing option A.
It would be option C. So a staff recommendation report and bylaw will be brought forward at a later meeting.
Thank you. Option C, that the application be referred back to staff. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, I now call upon Kate Harries of Aware and to present to council for up to 10 minutes. As you know, please sit and speak into the mic because we're being recorded, and state your name and address, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Thanks especially to Mayor Allen, who had to authorize this presentation because I was late getting it in. My name is Kate Harries, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of Aware Simcoe. And I was here to ask you to oppose Schedule 10 of Bill 66. As we know, that has now been withdrawn. I will still take a short amount of your time to explain why we thought it was a bad idea, because some of the underlying principles will still arise as your term progresses. Oh, that works. Bill 66, Schedule 10, is an omnibus bill introduced December 6th by the current Ontario government. And Aware Simcoe's main objection is the undemocratic nature of the proposed planning regime that removed from municipalities any obligation to provide public notice or information, to hold public hearings, or for any possibility of appeal once such bylaws were approved. And we did get the feeling that you would lose a considerable amount of power should you have adopted such bylaws in terms of your ability to address a project if if it went wrong. So democracy is not just once every 4 years. This is a rally against Sime 41 held in Perkinsfield in 2009. And it's an example of what happens when there's a deep disconnect between what government does and what citizens want. We do it by Twitter now, which is a lot less hard to organize. This is an example of what happens when there's a disconnect in the land use planning process. Natural spaces are obliterated, infrastructure is built, and then abandoned. In this case, in Spain in 2014, on a smaller scale, closer to home, an extension to the 6th concession near Everett was built by the last Agila-Tosarontio Council in the expectation of a development that didn't happen. It's now a road to nowhere. So how planning works, what I really wanted to say here is that since the days of Premier Bill Davis, there has been a steady progression based on promotion of orderly growth, care for public health, and stewardship of farmland and natural heritage. This graphic is from Ottawa, but something similar applies across the province. Through the years, success has been patchy. Sprawl, which is the inefficient use of land, has gobbled up so much farmland and natural space. But the general idea is for carefully planned change with maximum public buy-in. So at the local level, we have provincial policy. At the provincial level, provincial policy statement. At the local level, official plans that lay out how land is to be used, and the OP process is one of the most positive ways people interact with their government and have a say in the future of their communities. The internationally recognized Minising Wetlands is the most diverse undisturbed wetland in Canada, part of 3 townships, Clearview, Esser, and Springwater. But all is not well. Our stewardship has fallen short. This unique habitat is being degraded by human activity, including development in a dozen settlement areas, including Barrie, Midhurst, Everett, Angus, Snow Valley. So the general idea of rules is so we live in harmony with each other and natural forces. And these are some of the rules that we were going to set aside under Schedule 10. And I will only mention one, which I think is one of the key reasons why Schedule 10 was withdrawn, which was the Clean Water Act, which is not about protecting the environment. It's about protecting us, our public health. It was introduced in the wake of the Walkerton inquiry after 7 people died, and it represented the commitment of a progressive conservative government of the day that such a tragedy would never occur again. So Brockton councillors didn't know that when it came to water, there was weak legislation and poor oversight. But after May 2000, they were the ones who had to face the grief and the anger of their residents. Alone among them, Councillor Mary Robinson Ramsay had taken note of the alarming reports from the Environment Ministry, from one Environment Ministry inspector, and she tried to get other members of council to take action. She was ignored. The Clean Water Act hasn't solved all problems. It addresses municipal water systems. It leaves many private wells and vulnerable aquifers with no protection from contamination or over-extraction. That's why we were calling for Greenbelt protection to be extended into Simcoe County. So I won't bore you with these statistics, which show that we do have employment lands here in Springwater and in Simcoe County as a whole. And I will just pause with regard to farmland because this is so important. There's an error here. I say that that there's been a reversal of the trend of the loss of farmland. There's just been a slowing of the loss. And we now lose 175 acres a day, which is still too much in Ontario. So I just want you to be aware that various farm groups were adamant in their opposition to Bill 66, Schedule 10. And I'll read a couple of quotes from their submissions to the government.
3 minutes left, Kate. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. So the Ontario Federation of Agriculture said, while Bill 66 claims to give businesses more flexibility to create jobs right here at home, Schedule 10 forgets and abandons the businesses that are already right here in our agri-food sector. Agriculture is a business. This proposal suggests that agricultural land should no longer be used for agriculture and should make way for commercial and industrial business. The agri-food sector is the economic powerhouse of Ontario, employing 822,000 Ontarians and generating nearly 40 billion in GDP. The Nottawasaga River, last time I was addressing council, I believe, was in 2014. The council was headed by Mayor Linda Collins, and we secured the support of the council of the day in our campaign to get the Nottawasaga listed under the Navigable Waters the Navigable Waters Act. The exceptionally beautiful dragonfly portrayed here is the Hines emerald. It survives in Canada only in the Minising wetlands. It requires shallow, undisturbed, spring-water-fed marshes and sedge fens surrounded by forests and meadows. These are features that are presently being degraded. The Hines emerald is a symbol of why no development should be allowed to bypass regulation that protects farmland, water, and natural heritage, which are all under threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Well, as you know, Council on January 9th, 2019, directed staff to advise the province that further information is required prior to providing further comments. And we did do that, and lo and behold, the government listened. So
I wish they'd waited a little, and then I could have claimed credit.
We just received changes today that we haven't had a chance to read and digest. So we will look forward to trying to figure out what the next pitch is from the government vis-a-vis this particular topic, and we will look at whether they're, if and when they're coming out, well, they're going to be coming out with regulations, but what it will involve around the planning section of this, and we will consider it further at that time, staff and council. Any other questions or discussion points with respect to this? Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. Kate, has your group reached out to Doug Downey, our provincial representative, and tried to explain these issues?
As individuals, a number of us have emailed Mr. Downey, and we're part of the umbrella group, the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, and they have met with Mr. Downey. Yes, so there has been an effort to communicate.
Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And Kate, thanks for coming. I appreciate the presentation. I'd like to just do a little history lesson here, so just bear with me. I think one of the reasons why we're seeing this kind of legislation is if we go back 10 years when the previous government brought in the Green Energy Act. That Green Energy Act took a lot of the powers of the municipalities away. Like their solar panels and solar farms around here were complete bush lots. Everything was wiped out, taken right away. And I'd like to ask you, where were you guys when that was going on?
We were expressing opposition to the Green Energy Act,
Well-
where Simcoe does not support it, and we thought that was a very poorly conceived piece of
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And municipalities all over the province fought back loud and clear. And I think this is a derivative from that. we were asking for a hammer and they gave us a jackhammer instead. But the fact of the matter is, at least this government, or maybe the previous government, started listening. That one piece of legislation, the Green Energy Act, that caused a lot of havoc in our province. There's not enough hours in the night to talk about that. But the fact of the matter is, this is where it's coming from. That and a lot of other legislation that was poor legislation. So we're given powers to now deal with this. So we'll wait to see where this comes from. But thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or? All right, can I have a mover and a seconder that the delegation from Aware Simcoe be received? Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next, we move into question period, where members of the public are invited to ask questions of council or make comments regarding an item on the agenda. Each person may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes, and question period will not exceed a total of 10 minutes. Please come forward if you have a question or comments.
So my name is David Strawn. I live at 47 Finlay Mill Road in Midhurst here, and so my comment is a nature of a comment as opposed to a question, and it's regarding the item for consideration of moving the time forward to 5:30. This is purely an opinion, and that is that I think starting at where it is right now at 6:30 does give people on council and staff and representatives from the public a chance to have some dinner before coming out, and seems to me as a personal note that it's a more convenient time to have it the way it is right now at 6:30. Maybe some other points of view, but in my view it's kind of nice to get some dinner before you come along to the meeting.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Mayor Allen, good evening, council. My name is Bernard Pope. I live at 2417 Bass Lake Side Road East in Ormadati. During the last council, there was a move to build an agricultural advisory committee, and going over this section 10 of your agenda, I see that you've done that with Councillor Cabral, excuse me if I've said it wrong, and Anita Moore. I think this is admirable you've done that, and it's also admirable that you've placed one of those councillors on the Planning and Development Advisory Committee, so there is a little bit of correlation there. So I'm pleased you understand that I am part of an agricultural voice in the county and the province, and I think this is very well done that you have implemented this. The other thing I'd like to comment on, if I may, is to Mr. Ritchie. I think Mr. Ritchie understands that in 2009 I was one of the voices that spoke against the Green Energy Act all the way up to the province, up to the Premier rather, and I still have a multitude of files if you want to review them. It's heartening to see that now it's been corrected for sure. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. I just might add that county councils have been determined, and I am sitting as the county representative on the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture, and I'm also on the Agricultural Liaison Committee at the county. So
I understand as much.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to participating in both of those.
See you the first Thursday of the month.
Look forward to that. Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Greetings, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Thank you for giving me a few minutes. I just have 3 very brief points. I would like to thank the Springwater Council for supporting our family.
Can we have a name and address, please?
Janet Spring, 2438 County Road 92, Elmvale. I'd like to thank at this opportunity the Springwater Council for supporting our family crisis in Honduras in regard to the imprisonment of my son-in-law, Edwin Espinal, who is a human rights worker in Honduras, He's a Honduran national. I'd like to thank you also regarding the Springwater resolution that you passed in May of 2018 regarding Edwin's incarceration and the difficult issues with the Honduran, illegal Honduran regime. And this spearheaded the e-petition that was sponsored by Alex Nadal, the parliamentary petition. And this will be presented later in February, after the closing date of February the 7th. So I thank you very much for that support, because that is one of the reasons that our e-petition began. And lastly, I'd like to announce our January 27th meeting in Elmvale at the Community Hall at 2 p.m. We invite the Springwater Council. The Simcoe County Honduras Rights Monitor presents this community meeting, and it's regarding the Honduras political prisoners, and it's a 2019 update, and it's 1 year since my son-in-law has been incarcerated in La Tova Maximum Security Prison for his work in human rights in Honduras. And I thank you from the bottom of our heart for your support.
Thank you, Mrs. Spring.
Thank you.
I look forward to attending on the 27th and hearing more and figuring out how we can continue to try to help you in your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Any other questions?
Good evening, Council. My name is Hale Mahan. I'm from 33 Hillview Crescent. I have a question about the item 14.1, which is the motion to move the start time for the meetings back to 5:30. I'd just like to ask what the motive behind this would be.
Well, we are going to be dealing with it, and so I encourage you to stay around and hear the discussion surrounding the motion at the time, and you'll get a fulsome idea of the reasoning for it and what the next steps are with respect to that motion. So thank you for your question, and look forward to you staying for the whole meeting till we get to that point, and maybe thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for those. Next, we may have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes. Councillor Moore, Councillor Chapman. That the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. That's the minutes of the special meeting of council on January 9, minutes of special council closed session January 9, and the minutes of regular meeting of council January 9. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. And may I have a mover and a seconder for the boards, committees, and other organizations? Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, thank you. Moved that the minutes of the boards, committees, and other organizations listed herein be received as information. That's the minutes of the Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting October 18, and the same committee on December 6. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence and the information items? Councillor Cabral, Councillor Chapman, thank you. That the correspondence and information items listed herein be received as information. That being the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, re the Regional Government Review, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, re the Regional Government Review in the County of Simcoe, Warden Cornell, re the Regional Government Review. Any questions or discussions with respect to these? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. seconder for the committee and board appointments. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Chapman. Thank you. That the council of the township of Springwater hereby confirms the following council appointments to the listed committees and boards of council. This is just to get it on the table, then we'll have discussion. Councillor Moore and Deputy Mayor Coughlin, thank you. The mover and seconder. Read it the whole thing. Yeah. So that the Council of Township of Springwater hereby confirms the following council appointments to the listed committees of the boards and councils: the Agriculture Advisory Committee, Councillor Cabral, Councillor Moore; Cultural Activities Advisory Committee, Councillor Chapman and Councillor Hanna; Heritage Advisory Committee, Deputy Mayor Coughlin; Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, Councillor Moore; Planning and Development Advisory Committee, Councillor Moore and Councillor Hanna. Questions? Oh, there are more after, oh boy. Recreation Advisory Committee, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Chapman. Economic Development Advisory Committee, myself and Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Finance and Audit Committee, myself and Councillor Cabral. Grants Advisory Committee, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Chapman. Elmville Business Improvement Area, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Cabral. Springwater Public Library, Councillor Chapman and Councillor Moore. Springwater Sports Heritage, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Anton Mills Community CRA, I'll call it, Community Recreation Association, Councillor Cabral. Grenfell CRA, Councillor Moore. Hillsdale CRA, Councillor Ritchie. Midhurst CRA, Councillor Hanna. Minnesing CRA, Councillor Chapman. And Phelpston Community CRA, Councillor Ritchie. Discussions, questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I don't know who to direct my question to, but I'd like to know the appointments for the committees, why some have 2 councillors assigned, some have 1. I'd like to know the difference, if that, between a committee, a working group, potentially a board, or the Heritage, Springwater Sports Heritage, nothing. I'd like some information or standardization on these committees. Thanks.
Okay, I'll turn to Clerk Chaperon to help us out initially here.
Thank you, through you. So the difference between boards and committees, it really at that point is how they're established. So a board of council is the Springwater Public Library Board, the Community Recreation Associations, Business Improvement Area, as well as the Sports Heritage. They have a bit more authority than say a committee of council. So they're a bit more autonomous in the decisions that can be made. Each one of them are different, and each one of them have their own mandate in terms of reference that would, or piece of legislation that would garner how they function. As an example, the Springwater Public Library is very regulated through the Libraries Act. BIAs have very strict parameters through that various legislation. Committees of council are completely determined, the terms of reference, what they're allowed and not allowed to do, what their authority is completely determined by council. So you would have seen over the last few meetings the terms of reference for these various committees coming forward. There are some on this meeting tonight, so each committee has different authority based on what council has provided through their terms of reference. So through those terms of reference, it would also show the impact on, say, a member's time. So the members of that committee, it'll state whether it's a monthly meeting, whether it's quarterly, or whether it's by the call of the chair, say, for the grants committee, because that would only be called when an application would come in. So on the surface, that would be the difference between the boards and the various committees of council.
So I would ask then, who determined the number of participants per committee, per councillors per committee?
Clerk Chaperon?
Yes, thank you. So before the commencement of the term, staff would have sent around a chart to all members of council to seek initial determination on what members might be interested in. Members of council submitted those interests, and a chart was created and provided to the mayor. The mayor and the deputy mayor spoke and determined preliminarily what committees might be assigned to various members of council, and this is where this is the motion or the recommendation that has come out of that.
I'll just add to that. I think also part of the question is what's the determination of whether there's one counselor or two counselors on committees or boards? We did send it around. What has just been distributed to each of you is a summary of the committees and boards, including the community recreation associations, including the county responsibilities that Deputy Mayor Coghlan and myself and I have signed up for, basically. And so it results in myself being on about 10 different committees and responsibilities, Deputy Mayor Coghlan being on 8, Councillor Ritchie, and this is in no order, in particular being on 4 thus far, Councillor Moore on 5, Councillor Hanna on 3, Councillor Chapman on 6, and Councillor Cabral on 3. And as I say, that's inclusive of Community Recreation Association representation. So we, being Deputy Mayor Coghlan, myself, and the clerk, sat down after expressions of interest to try to slot these, given the composition of council members on the different committees. Where there were holes, we tried through discussion or through process of elimination to fill them, but as there's still some disproportionate numbers here, and so I welcome any discussion about that. Councillor Cabral.
Through Mayor Allen, just a point, we're missing one on here for the Elmvale Rec on this particular sheet.
Yeah, the reason that was off is the Elmvale Community Recreation Association is not, my understanding, has not been active.
Okay.
The Elmvale BIA is the active body, which both you and Deputy Mayor Coghlan sit on. That's why that was excluded. Any other comments? Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I appreciate the explanation of how the determination of who was going to be on what committee was arrived at. I did not put my name down for the Cultural Committee. I did see an email sometime prior to that I was on the Heritage Committee, but now I'm on the Cultural Committee, and I will work as a team and honor that commitment, but I would have appreciated, to be frank, some consultation before being assigned to a committee. So I hope going forward in the future we can have that working relationship. I'd be more appreciative of that.
Deputy Mayor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I can speak to that. During this consultation period, we did reach out to all members of council. As you were saying, you did receive the email, and with no response back to us, we didn't really have an option. It was basically a guessing game. And to be honest with you, when we were trying to figure it out, there was a lack of interest in many of the, I shouldn't say that, the response we got from the community was overwhelming with these, so we wanted to make sure that all these committees move forward, but we didn't have, to be frank, council stepping forward to put their names forward in things that may or may not interest them. So that's why for heritage and things like that, we put ourselves in them, because it is an awkward situation to dictate to someone what they need to do for 4 years. So we did pull a lot of it onto ourselves. I completely agree that there needs to be a team effort moving forward and try and balance this workload. I'm of the opinion that while I would like to take more on from our mayor, we do need to free up the mayor so that when there is a business opening or there's a lot of other things that the mayor needs to be available for. So I would like to see us come together and figure out how to make sure that all these committees do have council representation. Further to Councillor Moore's point, there was a change in the library board at the last terms of reference. There used to be just one member of council sitting on it, and it is up to council if we would like to take the composition where there's 2 members going to something, we can change that back to only having 1 on that, if that's how we're going to alleviate that, because we do have more committees than a lot of other councils. So I think that it's fantastic that we have residents willing to work with us and help us become informed. And I do think there's a solution to this. We just have to come together and figure it out.
I would reiterate that there has been significant and very positive response by the residents to want to sit on these committees, and that's very heartening, and we look forward to the input. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as councillors to have good representation and to make sure that we're involved on these committees so that we get the most out of them. Historically, there have been generally 2 councillors on the committees, because in case one councillor couldn't make it in meetings, there was still council representation through the other councillor. It also brought a different perspective of 2 councillors on the committees. So further discussion. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and just for clarification, I did receive an email pointing me on to a different committee that I'm on tonight, but I received it on my personal email site. In the humorous manner in which it was sent, I didn't pay much attention to it, so that's why I didn't respond.
What committees would you like to sit on, Councillor? Would you like to be involved with, Councillor Hanna?
I appreciate being asked. I'm happy to go with what you and the deputy mayor have determined here. I'm just asking that in future, I would appreciate some consultation before I'm assigned to or dictated to where I'm going to be assigned. So
Are there any other committees in addition to the 3 that you'd be willing to sit on?
my question goes back to our former meetings. I'm not sure if we're going to still have the Environmental Steering Committee or the Environmental Liaison Committee. I see we've done away with the Fire Committee and the Building Committee, which I put my names down for as well. So I'd like to wait and see, could you maybe answer the question tonight? Have we done away with the Environmental Steering Committee and the Environmental Liaison Committee? Because those are important committees for me to be on, and they are time-consuming.
CAO Brindley is ill tonight. I would direct that. Maybe Director Spagnol, do you see that committee, steering committee regarding the environmental continuing, or will further matters with respect to the Midhurst secondary plan just come directly to council?
Mayor Allen, I think it's probably more appropriate for the CAO to speak to future steps for those committees and whatnot. So I think I'd refer that over to him when he returns, and we can probably have an answer for the next meeting.
Okay, we will park that until that happens. So, any other comments? Councillor Chapman. Councillor Ritchie, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just here. There's the fundraising committee for the Elmville High School. I'm on that, and how active that is, I don't know. I imagine we'll be getting together here sometime this year. And the Elmville High School, the partnership agreement. That's whenever we're needed, we're called to it. But they are committees. I have sat on them. I will continue to sit on them. The length of this term, anyways. So those two brings me up to 6. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. What this tries to capture, though, is existing ongoing committees, and I don't. Those have been very valuable committees in the past, but I don't believe they're active committees now. The initiatives resulting from them continue, but I don't think they're active committees presently.
Mayor Allen, I would imagine the fundraising committee will be active because we'll be getting together to, as they get using as the additions finished off, as they move in, as they start using it, there's going to be people come before us wanting to put forward requests for equipment, and that's something where it'll be coming before us to, I would assume, to discuss as to how we dispense some of these funds that we've raised for equipment for the new school. So I'd like to sit on that and continue to sit on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral?
Yes, Mayor Allen, just looking over this, I realized that with the Elmvale Recreational Committee not going, they appeared to have 12 meetings per year, so I think some of the committees do have a higher frequency of meetings throughout the year, but obviously without that particular one, I'm certainly available to take on another role if need be, and I certainly wouldn't mind doing that. I can also see the value possibly of maybe reducing the number of councillors attached to each committee, basically based on what the committee's going to be doing in reference to their own terms of reference, which were provided when the committees were formed.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
So just to reiterate, reducing the number of councillors per committee, is our job as councillors, when sitting on the committee, to bring a township perspective, not necessarily a personal perspective, and then furthermore to bring back items for consideration to council on that committee's behalf? I think that one council person can do that, and say that council person is not well or can't make the visit or the meeting that day, we could reach out to other council members to sit in on our behalf. I'd like to at least consider that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. As far as bringing it down to one member of council, it's definitely doable. We would have to amend the terms of reference to reflect that change for the membership. As far as an alternate, we would have to appoint an actual alternate to the committee, because all membership to committees must be appointed through council. So we wouldn't, it would have to be a specific member who is appointed as the alternate versus just being able to select somebody who's available.
Follow on, Councillor Moore?
Follow up. I would be more than happy to sit with you to go through the terms of reference on the committees to look at that reallocation. I'd take the time to do that apart from regular council meetings, if you would like.
Thank you. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, and I like the suggestion, and my suggestion would be, as an alternate, appoint everybody as a member of council to be that alternate, and then it would be up to the councillor who couldn't attend to contact somebody and ask them to sit in for them, and hopefully we could do that one-off thing and it would work out.
Any other comments or discussions? It sounds like we should consider referring this back to staff to have another crack at it, and maybe look at one councillor with the alternate possibility, and email to councillors to reconsider and express their interest on which committees. This will not limit us from being able to review, as we are going to tonight, the public members of the committee and agree upon those, but it will review our council representation. So we're just crafting a motion. 1 second, please. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this motion? Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Ritchie, that the motion now before council be referred to staff for review of the council composition on all committees. Any questions or further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to action reports. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the action reports at 11.1? Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Cabral. That the action report items 11.2 through 11.5 be received, and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. 11.2, oversize, overweight load permits bylaw. 11.3, temporary borrowing bylaw. 11.4, approval of committee terms and reference second stage, Economic Development Advisory, Finance and Audit, Grants Advisory Committee, and 11.5, easement agreement request of Bell Canada. Would anybody like to pull any of these items for further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we move to information reports 12.1. May I have a mover and a seconder for the information reports? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Cabral. That the reports item listed herein be received as information. Do I have to read through all these? 12.2, bylaw activity report for October and November. 12.3, bylaw activity report December. 12.4, the building permit activity summary for November. 12.5, building permit activity for December. 12.6, the accessibility and the 2018 municipal election. 12.7, another report on the 2018 municipal election. 12.8, drinking water inspection report Elmvale. 12.9, ZB 218-009 Punya Group, Inc., regarding 6088 County Road 90. 12.10, OP 2018-04 lots 8 and 9. Plan 51M-995, 12.11, ZB 2018-011 for 2006-384 Ontario, Inc., the Gallo subdivision, part of the north half of Lot 7, Concession 8. Any discussions or any of these you'd like to have pulled? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. The report 12.2 on bylaw activity.
Okay, if it's a question or just clarification?
I'd like to refer to that report at a later time when we're speaking about items for consideration.
Okay.
So I just don't know if we pull it now so that it's on our desktop, or how do we refer back to that? Thank you.
Clerk Chaparro?
Thank you. If you're going to refer to just information in the report through another item, you wouldn't need to pull this item. If you have a specific question about the report itself, then we can deal with it at this time. But if you'd like to refer to information from it at a future item, that's completely fine.
Okay, then we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to pull any of these? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we have verbal reports, and we'll turn to Director Spagnol for verbal reports. Any verbal updates on the official plan or economic development?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. No, at this point, I don't have any new reports on either one of those items.
Thank you, and turn to Deputy Mayor Coughlin for council update, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. At the county this week, our last meeting has passed or approved the agenda, wait for my notes here. Our budget at 2%. Notably, we also added an additional 2 yard waste pickups and also approved our committee appointments.
Thank you. Any municipal updates? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just have one again, menacing manifest is coming up February 8th and 9th. Sorry about that. February 8th and 9th. If you want to come out to our pancake breakfast on Saturday, plus we have a dance Saturday night, and if you want to be in the parade, you can contact Mike through our Facebook page. We'd love to see everyone and hope the weather's good to us.
Maybe just repeat what it was beginning, because your mic was off the first part.
Because I was holding the, for Menacing Minifest, February 8th and 9th.
Thank you very much. Any other municipal announcements? I'd like to just review, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and myself are going to the Roma conference this weekend, And at that, we're making some delegations that I just wanted to review with council and make the public aware. These are all on January 28th, one at 9 a.m., one at 11 a.m., another one close to noon, and the other at 1 p.m. We're meeting with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, Parliamentary Assistant Andrea Kanjan. The topic will be discussions surrounding performance of Conservation Authority, the NVCA, and its impact on the township. At 11, we're meeting with the Ministry of Transport, Minister Jeff Urick. The topic will be requesting licensing requirement changes for all-terrain vehicles on public roadways and trail systems. And also we will be discussing requested further improvements to the pedestrian crossover located at Highway 93, Pennetank Machine Road in Hillsdale. At noon, we're meeting with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services, being Minister Sylvia Jones. The topic, Township of Springwater and partner municipalities in the Huronia West Detachment catchment area, Clearview and Wasaga Beach, would like to move forward with a Police Services Board detachment board. The municipality was advised to put this plan on hold by the OPP staff until expected changes are made to the Police Services Act. The partner municipalities would like to move forward with a Police Services Board, and the Township of Springwater would like to discuss any anticipated changes to the Police Services Act. And I'm going to a Police Services meeting tomorrow, so I will have more information thereafter. And finally, at 1 p.m. on the 28th, we're meeting with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, Minister Michael Tibolo, to discussion surrounding funding opportunities for Bricks and Mortar Springwater Hall of Fame. So we're glad to have gotten those delegations, and we will bring back to council the fruits of our labors thereafter. Thank you. Next, 14.1, motions to which notice was given. The following motion has been moved by Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I'll read that now. And I need a seconder for this motion, please, before we review it. Councillor Chapman. That council hereby requests a report outlining the process to change the start time of the regular meetings of council to 5:30 p.m. and that this report include the results of the public survey conducted in 2016, and that the report be included for consideration on the February 6, 2019 regular council meeting agenda. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I will let you open the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The reason or the purpose for this to be brought forward, this was brought forward to past council, and during that time we did decide to keep it at the 6:30. It was indicated by a member of council, not myself, that it would be a good idea to look at it again. Council is comprised of people who work full-time and don't work full-time. Also, in speaking with Clerk Chaperone, there is an opportunity for us to relook at how our meetings are placed, indicating that while we in no way as I am in no way suggesting to move a 5:30 start time to waiver the transparency or availability that we have to our residents. I do believe that when we are making this decision, that our residents are our main focus. We also need to consider that when we have a 4:30 closing time and a 6:30 meeting time, we do have members of senior staff that do acquire or receive lieu time. So there is an opportunity for $20,000. It's not a savings to the municipality, but we do pay it out if it's required. So we do need to take a lot of things into consideration. In speaking with Clerk Chaperone, there is an opportunity for us when there is a contentious issue or something that is important to residents, or that we're made aware that is important to residents, we can put a 7 o'clock start time or a 6:30 start time. So we can go on with our regular housekeeping and items beginning at 5:30 and still have that available to the residents. This is just for us to have this brought to our table so that we can have the discussion as what works best for this council, our residents, and our staff. The reason I asked for the past report and not for new information is that myself personally, I have not seen an increase in people participating, other than some members who are showing up now. But I do think that there's a consistent level of interest in our meetings, and I don't, in my opinion, feel that a 5:30 start time, if we are considerate of our contentious or important issues being highlighted and made available to our residents. I don't think that we need any new information or to request staff to send out new reports. I believe that if this council was to receive that information, we would be able to make a decision.
Thank you. Other discussion, comments? Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor. Alan, I will not be supporting this motion, and up front, I'll be asking for a recorded vote. I don't think it's necessary. I believe that if we go back to the 2014 election, it was an issue at that time for the election, and a number of people came forward asking to have the council meetings moved from 5:30 to 6:30, and people who ran for election, some signed a agreement that they would do that, or to get endorsement, I guess, from the people who were asking for it. So that took place at that time. Since that time, we've also, at one time, we went into one meeting a month. One meeting for council meetings, and then we started going on to 10 o'clock at night. So we went back to two meetings, and that's worked out better. When we had our meetings in the previous council before the last council at 5:30, we had the closed session at the end of the night, which was a problem for our legal counsels or whoever had to be there for the closed session. We were breaking up in the middle of the meeting and so on, and we looked like a disorganized council, to be honest with you. So the 6:30 has worked out very well. We have our closed session, as people know here, sitting here tonight, we have our closed sessions before the council meeting that starts at 6:30. Sometimes that closed session will be at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And I believe that this council would be, I'm afraid, creating the impression that we don't care what our residents want, because it was the residents who wanted the 6:30 meeting. And people who work and commute, they cannot be here for 5:30. They can be here for 6:30 if they rush it. Sometimes we have a few people here, sometimes this room is full. Depends on what's going on. I disagree with this way this has taken place. If we're going to have a survey from 2016, then I think we got to go back to 2014 election time, when people were coming forward stating that they wanted these meetings of their council later than 5:30, so we went to 6:30. As everybody knows, Barrie's council meetings are at 7 o'clock at night. And I realize that sometimes staff may not be here for the closed session. There's a lapse between time. But not all staff have to attend, just some of the key staff. It's an opportunity for us to come early and sit down with those folks and go through some of the questions that are on the agenda. So that makes us more efficient, and it helps staff as well. Nobody's blindsided. I really think this is a step backwards. We're reverting back to something that we've created that's working well, and as I say, I'm asking for a recorded vote because I think it's important for the residents to know who's supporting them. To be honest with you, I think that's important. The other question I would ask, if this goes forward, and there's 4 people here that are going to support a report from staff for this, I would ask that it doesn't come back on February the 6th. It comes back later in the month, so we have time to reach out to our residents and get their input. Thank you.
So for clarification, Councillor Hannah, are you asking for a recorded vote on this motion or when it comes back?
I'm asking for a recorded vote on this motion tonight, so we don't waste time with staff having to generate a report, 1, and 2, our residents realize that right up front, we're not going to do this, that we're staying where we are because it's working well. But my next request is that if this 4 people out here that decide we need to go and consider changing something that works well, then I've asked that it doesn't come back on the 6th of February, it comes back later in the month of February.
Further comment, discussion? Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And I'm going to say, if I'm out of order, let me know. Councillor Hannah, or through you, when I was watching the tape to figure this out, I'm actually surprised that it was actually, sorry, that you are saying this. It was you who said that we should consider this again after the 2018 election. So my apologies, it's on the recording. So maybe I listened to it wrong. I'll go back and look at that. I didn't know that asking for this information again was not something that you supported.
Thank you, and I wish you would share that with me because I don't recall having this discussion before. Thank you. I may be getting senile, but honestly, I do not remember us ever discussing moving the election, or the meeting time earlier in the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. This is my first time on council. What was the times before it got changed to 6:30? Was it 5:30? Has it always been 5:30 before the last council? Has it sometimes been 5 o'clock?
Do you know Clerk Chaperon? Maybe yes, Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Confirm with staff that it was 5:30, I believe, previous to the change to 6:30.
So for the term of council from 2010 to 2014, the meetings were at 5:30, is that correct? Started at 5:30?
Mayor Allen, thank you. From my recollection, it seems like a long time ago, but I believe it was 5:30, yes.
Councillor Hannah's nodding his head in agreement. Other points? Councillor Cabral?
Through Mayor Allen, I guess more of a comment. Some of us have the luxury of being able to attend meetings at pretty well any hour, given our own personal schedules. We might not have work commitments. I think as a whole, council's obligation is to the residents, and I think that the meetings have to be open and available to the residents at a time that's convenient to them. I think at the end of the day, it's a matter as far as staff, and I certainly do take them into consideration. But like most people who are involved in an employment situation, they kind of know what they're getting into, and hopefully I think there is a cost attributable to it, but at the same time, I think it has to be available to the public. I know they can stream as well, but at the same time, they have to be home to be able to do that, and 5:30, there's still a lot of commuting going on, so I think I would be reluctant to change the time, but once again, I'd have to ask the residents in my own ward what they felt about it. So just a comment on that.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? So we're dealing with a motion that is amended. Okay, I'll turn to Clerk Chaperon.
Thank you. When Councillor Hannah was speaking, he mentioned a request to have the report brought back to the February 20th meeting. If you would like that, you would have to propose an amendment to the motion to have that changed. Council would have to vote on it, and then the main motion would be amended if it were successful. So if you would like to propose an amendment, now would be the time.
Thank you, ma'am, and I appreciate that. I will propose the motion that it comes back on February the 20th, just in case this does go forward tonight.
And a seconder for this motion, please. Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the motion before council be amended as follows: replace February 6th with February 20th, 2019. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So that's carried. We have moved by Coughlin, seconded by Councillor Chapman, the motion that was read before with the change date to February 20th coming back, and there has been a requested recorded vote on this. So I'll turn it over to Clerk Chaperon to conduct that.
Oh, it was just a comment before the vote was cast.
Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Actually, 2 points. This was not meant to be contentious. It was just to get it on the floor so that we could reach out and speak with our residents. And I did speak with senior management, and I did speak with all members of council. The other point was through Clerk Chaperon, I believe this is our first recorded vote, so if we could go over the procedure of recorded vote prior to, please.
Thank you. Clerk Chaperon.
Thank you. A recorded vote was requested by Councillor Hannah. I will read out the names of the councillors in in alphabetical order. When I state your name, please, through the microphone, state yes if you are in favor of this motion, or no if you are voting against the motion.
Yeah. Just for clarification and review the motion, that council hereby requests a report outlining the process to change the start time of regular meetings of council to 5:30 p.m., and that this report include the results of a public survey conducted in 2016, and that the report be included for consideration on the February 20, 2019 regular council meeting agenda. All those in favor, recorded vote.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral?
Oops. Did you get that? Yes on that particular motion?
Councillor Hannah?
No?
Councillor Chapman?
Yes.
Councillor Moore?
No.
Councillor Ritchie?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Yes?
And Mayor Allen?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
All right, moving to item 16, items for future consideration. But before I do that, are there any further notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, then we move on to items of future consideration. Are there any current items for future consideration before we get into the 16.2, considering the outstanding items for future consideration? Are there any current items for future consideration that people might want to raise? Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn, and it's not an addition to the items for future consideration. It was just a comment to staff regarding the, I'm going to call it Springwater garb that has gone out to our skating rinks and to our volunteers who do take care of the skating rinks for us. Very well received, so thank you very much for that, and that was about it.
Thank you. So, okay, then we're moving on to reviewing the items for future consideration, the outstanding items. So we're going to be tabling these one at a time, and staff have prepared a report outlining all of the outstanding items for future consideration. Each will be tabled separately, and Clerk Chaperon will provide any required background, and we can have any discussion as we review each of these. And council will have the opportunity to decide whether they wish to keep the item on the list, and therefore staff time will be invested on following up on that, or whether it comes off the list. So I need a mover and a seconder for the first one, please. Councillor Moore and Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the item for future consideration, IFC I'll call these, from Mr. French regarding the organization of an information session regarding the township's responsibility of duty to consult with Aboriginal peoples in Ontario be hereby removed from the list of IFCs. Discussions on this matter? Councillor Hannah?
I'm sorry, I just don't quite understand the motion, to be honest with you.
The motion is taking a look at each of the items for future consideration and basically deciding whether it remains on the list or whether it gets removed.
Oh, sorry, no, the one you just read, I don't understand. I remember the discussions at the time. It was suggested that the notice be on the top of all our agendas, I believe. And then the motion now was not to do that?
So this is a time where I'll turn it over to Clerk Chaperon to give a bit of background with respect to this particular IFC.
Thank you, through you. This is a different item. Near the end of the 2014 to 2018 term, there was a notice of motion regarding a standing item on the council agenda. So this is separate. This was a item for future consideration, which happened, I believe, in 2017, where Mr. French was requesting that the ministry come and provide an information and educational session regarding council's duty to consult. So that's what this particular item is for. As far as details on what's happened since the IFC request, I had reached out to the ministry a few times to have somebody coming in. Discussions were taking place regarding potential times to schedule it. Once the election happened, all correspondence with the ministry stopped coming in, and I just hadn't followed up since then through the election.
Other comments with respect to this? Okay, seeing none, so we're voting on whether to remove it or not. So all those in favor of removing this from the list? Opposed? Carried? And a mover and a seconder to deal with the next one, please. Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the item for future consideration from Ms. McConkey requesting a report outlining opportunity for grace period for certain bylaws, such as the signage bylaw, be hereby removed from the IFC list. Before I do that, there will be a discussion with several of these pertain to signage, and we will have a presentation with respect to signage, a couple of down as we proceed. But in the interim, Director Spagnell, do you have information on grace period that you can share with us?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So the staff looked into grace periods and the provision of grace periods, and there was some issues with respect to timing to introduce any complaints or introduce any charges through the court system, which establishes certain timeframes that you must meet to be able to legally submit a charge and follow through with a bylaw enforcement matter. As part of this process, when we're dealing with bylaw enforcement, staff work under the mindset of first informing the property owner of what the compliance issue is. Second, educate the property owner as to how to bring the property into compliance, with enforcement as being the last resort. So in essence, through the regular workflow and the regular process, staff does not jump straight to issuing a charge and moving through the court system, because nobody wins in that situation because of the cost and the timing that's associated to obtain compliance. So instead, staff attempts to try to gain compliance through, again, informing, education, and trying to work through those avenues before filing a charge. So in essence, through the regular work process of enforcement officers, there is a grace period, because the timing of which there becomes an actual charge that goes through the courts can be extended over a certain number of months. And that's essentially how we operate, because again, I think it's important to note that really the municipality does not win by going through the court system, and neither does the property owner, or who might be subject to a complaint.
Thank you, Director. As I say, we'll be dealing with, and between Director Spagnell and Clerk Chaperon, we'll be following up and discussing further about signage, and maybe we could incorporate this a little later on. So any further comments at this time about this particular IFC? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder regarding the next IFC? Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Chapman. That the IFC from Ms. McConkey requesting that more signage be placed on trails advising that all dogs must be on a leash, and requesting a process be established for increased monitoring of trail systems and the process for reporting of incidents on the trails be hereby removed from the IFC list. I'll turn it over to Director Spagnell and/or Clerk Chaperon for a bit of background with respect to this.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. This IFC item was brought forward because we were experiencing, or the township was experiencing, a large number of complaints related to dogs being off leash within, I'll call them hotspot areas. And as far as the IFC goes, the idea here was to provide for additional monitoring and whatnot based on the identification of those hotspots and some problem areas related to dogs within township open space.
Any discussion, questions with respect to this? Councillor Moore.
I guess my question would be then, what is the liability to the township? Because I'm assuming Councillor McConkey was referring to things like dog bites and things that could be really problematic. Thank you.
Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Moore. Liability is essentially covered under the Dog Owners Liability Act, which is a legal offense. It's a provincial offense. The municipality's failure to post municipal bylaws is really at the discretion of the municipality to pinpoint those areas and identify, pinpoint those areas and provide the information necessary for residents that when they are in open spaces, that they are to keep their dogs on leash. But to my understanding, the liability, there isn't any liability with respect to signage of that because it is a law under provincial legislation.
Any other discussion or comments with respect to this before the vote on this particular IFC? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next, respect to ATVs, a mover and a seconder to bring this forward, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Chapman. That the item for future consideration from Mr. French requesting that the ATV bylaw be reviewed for allowance of the vehicles on township roads be hereby removed from the IFC list. I'll turn this to Director Belcourt to add some information, background, and plans for dealing with this going forward.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Council. We are currently processing requests for additional ATV trails, which includes more roads, road access, and off-road access. So we thought it best, in conjunction with this IFC, to go back and have a more comprehensive consultation on ATV use throughout the Springwater, all of Springwater, and in general looking at permitting the use of off-road vehicles on all municipal roads. We do have a report planned to be on the February 6th agenda, bringing this forward to Council for their consideration.
Thank you. Discussions, questions? Councillor Cabral.
Through Mayor Allen to Director Belcourt. I'm just curious, I believe that Oro-Medonte had underwent a pilot project where a portion of the township was made available to ATV users on some roads. I don't know if you're aware of that, Director Belcourt, or if you've had any dialogue with them. I'm just suggesting that maybe they might have some advice for us.
Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Corbell. Yes, we are aware of Oro-Medonte's pilot project. It started last summer for 1 year. So we will be consulting with them as we go through this process. Also, our other neighboring municipalities, Essa, Clearview, and Wasaga Beach, all have bylaws that permit use on all roads or some roads. So we are being surrounded by municipalities that do permit them, and which obviously if they have to get from one to the other, they have to go through us. So that's why one of the main reasons we're looking at bringing this and having public consultation on the matter.
Thank you. Further discussion or comments? So this will be dealt with in the upcoming report, as Director Belcourt mentioned. So seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next motion pertains to broadband. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this under consideration? Councillor Cabral and Councillor Moore. That I have see from Mayor Allen requesting that staff report on the possibility of broadband gap analysis be hereby removed from the list, the IFC list. I'll just comment on this. This is an initiative that we heard lots of while we were campaigning. It's one of the top several issues that I think need to be dealt with going forward. I'm working with County Council, the warden, who sits on the SWIFT organization, and I think it's something that we do have to pursue to see how we can improve, how we can help facilitate improvement of broadband in the township. I'd be willing to certainly support removing it off the list, knowing that the initiative is being pursued through different channels. So any other discussion, comment on that? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next has to do with Airbnbs. Mover and a seconder for this, please. Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Cabral. That the item for future consideration from Mr. French requesting a report regarding short-term rentals, for example Airbnb, be hereby removed from the IFC list. Clerk Chaperon, do you have any comment or background with respect to that, or refer it to staff?
If I could please ask Director Spagnell to comment.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. This IFC item was brought forward as a result of the need to take a look at possible ways to regulate, enforce short-term rentals due to issues related to impacts to permanent or existing residents within areas where you might experience short-term rentals for vacationers.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions about this? Seeing none then, all in favor of the removal? Opposed? Carried. Okay, mover and a seconder about another one regarding signs. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Chapman. That the IFC from Ms. McConkey requesting a report regarding review of the sign bylaw and its impacts on residents living on county roads be hereby removed from the IFC list. So I'll turn to Director Spagnell to give us some background about sign bylaws.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The sign bylaw was approved and revised and adopted by council in, I want to say, 2018. What has happened over the course of the last year is there have been a number of bylaw complaints related to, and I'll call them billboards, for a better word. And as a result of those complaints, there's been quite a bit of review and discussion over what the impact of those signs, the impact of the sign bylaw on properties which choose to erect signage. There's also been discussions revolving around the applicability of the zoning bylaw, and there has also been confusion about where signs are permitted and what the intended purpose was of the adopted sign bylaw with respect to signage across the municipality. So this IFC item was brought forward to review the sign bylaw in its entirety, and from my recollection, also to review the impacts of the sign bylaw, to prepare an inventory to determine which signs have been legally established, which ones haven't, and then to try to refine the sign bylaw to reflect the needs of the property owners and businesses that rely on those sign bylaws for additional revenue. As far as the IFC item goes with respect to resources and timing necessary, this would be quite a comprehensive type project, because of the timing that goes into reviewing each individual sign across the municipality for compliance with the bylaw, it would be quite difficult to review the history behind each sign and then create the inventory to determine, and also create the inventory, which would require extensive staff resources. There was two in particular that came forward in 2018, that came forward by way of delegation. Council resolved to provide for an extension a pause on any enforcement matters related to those signs in order to allow for the consideration of this IFC item and for staff to move forward and do the work necessary in order to fulfill this one item.
So for clarification, I understand it's one thing dealing with the sign bylaw, but then there's also rezoning. Can you clarify that, and we'd have to be looking at both of them to make either be effective, is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Yes, that is correct. The way the sign bylaw is worded is that any sign that is located on a property has to comply with the land use or the permitted land uses on that specific property. So for example, if you've got an agricultural property, the zoning bylaw allows for signage related to market gardens or home industries that are on that particular property. And it establishes a size requirement for those signs, which are to be followed as per the sign bylaw. So the zoning bylaw establishes the permitted use of the sign as long as it's for a market garden or a home industry. What the sign bylaw does is it establishes a maximum size for those signs and allows them to be located in an area that's visible on the property but does not conflict with any county road setbacks or sightline issues or anything of that nature. So in those instances where you may have a billboard on an agricultural property that advertises a commercial sign or a commercial business elsewhere, there would be a zoning issue because it's not a use that's on the property. And there would also be a sign bylaw issue because if it exceeds the size permissions under the bylaw, you've got non-compliance for the zoning bylaw and the sign bylaw. But first, it's whether or not it's permitted under the uses for the zoning bylaw.
So we have, as you stated, two situations that arose in 2018. One, we gave a resident until December 31st to have the sign remain up and then take it down. The other, we allowed the sign to remain up until we reviewed the sign bylaw, which you have just said also requires reviewing the zoning aspect. We had a recent situation where a sign went up, no permits were applied for, and discussions happened between the township and the party, and they've agreed to take the sign down. So this seems to be a problem that is ongoing and potentially recurring. So how long would it take, and how soon might we be able to address this by way of a report and a motion before we decide what to do with this IFC? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Estimated timing on a zoning bylaw, at this point I couldn't estimate. The reason for that is because if you're, say, for example, looking at permissions for, we'll call it a billboard sign on a residential property, in essence what would happen is you would have to answer the question whether or not it's appropriate for a billboard to be located on a residential property. And as you know, when you go through a zoning process, and if you're going to revise your zoning to allow those types of uses, there's public consultation that has to occur. There are staff reports that have to occur, and that is all subject to appeal through the LPAP process if somebody objects to where that's going. So to put a time frame on that work, I couldn't do at this point because the extent to which council wants to examine this hasn't been determined. But secondly, if you've got a zoning bylaw amendment that comes forward and gets appealed, the time frame for that is unknown because then really the approvals are at the mercy of the local planning appeal tribunal. To my mind, the zoning matter would have to be dealt with first before sign bylaw can be addressed, because there might be specific parameters that come out of that zoning process which might feed into the sign bylaw. So for example, what would be the appropriate size of a sign in a residential area? And that's just one example that I'm giving based on one of the issues that arose last year with respect to the billboard along Bayfield Street.
So if you're suggesting that the zoning bylaw would have to be dealt with first, then what would be a realistic time frame and time for that to occur?
Mayor Allen, I guess in order to get something done from an adoption standpoint to council, taking out the prospect of appeals through the local planning appeal tribunal, you could be looking anywhere from 6 to 8 months.
Okay, other discussion? Councillor Moore?
Thank you. So we recently had a situation come forward to my attention. I was a local resident in Ward 4 that was asked to remove their sign. When I asked CAO Brindley if bylaw was taking a proactive or reactive approach to signs that were not in compliance, he said you were taking a proactive approach. Looking around Ward 4, there are hundreds of signs that are not in compliance. We've got lots of commercial businesses, we've got builders. You don't have to look far to find a sign that wouldn't meet the bylaw as it stands right now. So is it the case then that you will be searching out signs that are non-compliant right now? Thanks.
Director Spagnell?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Moore. I think really it's at the discretion of council. Historically, the municipality or staff, when it comes down to bylaw enforcement, have taken a more of a reactive approach. It's one that's complaint-based. In recent years, there had been a push for staff to take a more proactive role, which is if staff sees an offense or sees something that might not be in compliance with the bylaw, then staff is to follow through and investigate. So really, it's a matter of direction from council that's required in order for staff to either take a reactive approach, which is complaint-based, or a proactive approach. So I think really the answer is it's up to council as to how council wants staff to seek compliance with its bylaws. And while keeping in mind that a reactive approach is less costly because we're not seeking out those bylaw enforcement matters or issues. They're coming to staff. Also keeping in mind that a proactive bylaw enforcement model would entail additional cost because now all of a sudden staff are actively seeking those compliant issues, those compliance issues. So really, it is at the discretion of council to determine the type of service that council wants to provide through bylaw enforcement, and staff would act as council wants staff to act as far as that whole concept works.
Might we consider removing this off the IFC and coming up with a notice of motion put forward by a councillor that would be crafted in consultation with Director Spagnell and CAO Brindley and Clerk Chaperon, to then have it come forward, to then have decide the terms of a report or the comprehensiveness of a report that then could come back to us and we could consider the Councillor Moore? Okay.
Yes, I will.
Councillor Cabral?
I'd just like to comment that currently we are, through Mayor Allen, to Director Spagnell, just more of a comment, I think. You kind of hit the nail on the head a bit there when we talk about our bylaw enforcement officers being reactive, and in some ways that might be the path to take. But I think we might have an inconceived idea if we're planning on making bylaw officers proactive specifically for a particular bylaw, given, say, let's say, signs, when we've got people with trailers in their driveways and all kinds of other stuff going on. So that would make for, I think, eventually we'd have an army of bylaw officers out there trying to enforce these proactively. My background, I can tell you, we were proactive when we had the opportunity for serious things, but for the most part, as you know, police are reactive, attending complaints. And I would just kind of suggest that we have to be maybe a little bit careful in crafting something where we're going to put a lot of pressure on bylaw to start going out there and being proactively involved in our bylaw enforcement.
Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and thank you, Councillor Cabral. Those are very good points, and one thing that Director of Finance was pointing out to me is that we do have limited resources and staff. So, you know, one approach versus another might be more suited to the municipality at this point in time, and to my mind, that would be the reactive approach. However, staff is at the will of council. And I think with respect to the question about bylaw enforcement in general, that direction has to be provided to the department so that staff knows that we're either to be reactive or proactive, so that the service level has been set and we're consistent in our approach across the board. So I think those are valid comments. And I think that as far as any report moving forward on something like this, that should be one of the considerations is, are we going to be looking at a reactive versus a proactive type complement for enforcement, recognizing that we have limited resources and staff?
Okay, thank you. So might I suggest then that we remove this from the IFC and that Councillor Moore and Councillor Cabral work with staff to come up with a notice of motion to bring back before council? Okay. So, given that, all those in favor of removing this IFC? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder to move into close, please, if Mayor Conlon and Councillor Chapman? Is that in accordance with section 239? Sorry. Moved by Councillor Coghlan, Deputy Mayor Coghlan and Councillor Chapman, that in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, the Corporation of Township of Springwater does hereby resolve to move into closed session at 8:19 p.m. for discussion pertaining to a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. The topic is the public member appointments to council committees. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you for waiting for us in closed session. Can I have a mover, and back to Mike's, out of closed session, back into open session? Can I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Ritchie. Okay, arising from closed session, council discussed recommendations regarding the public appointments to committees, and the following appointments have been recommended for approval tonight. And thank you to all those who submitted. We'll be following up with letters with respect to this. So the Agricultural Advisory Committee, Bart Klaas, David Spring, Drew Langman, Mark Priest, the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture Representative Bill French, the Cultural Activities Advisory Committee, Donna Kenwell, Haley McConkey, Helena Howell, Katie Austin, and Matthew Garwood. The Heritage Advisory Committee, Alyssa McGuinness, Byron Wesson, Donald Malloy, Joan Gannon, Peter Archer, and Sandra Harris. The Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, Liz Grummett. The Planning and Development Advisory Committee, Craig Davis, Michelle Bowman, Rick Campbell, Robert Kuiper, and William Salter. The Recreation Advisory Committee, Carl Luoma, Janine Peck, Jill Robertson, Kelly Braden Elliott, and Mike Priest. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws, please? Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Cabral, that the bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 2019-07 Agriculture Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. 2019-08 Committee of Adjustment Terms of Reference. 2019-09 Cultural Activities Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. 2019-10 Heritage Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. 2019-11 Planning and Development Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. 2019-12 Recreation Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. 2019-13 Amend Bylaw 2005-05 Oversized Overweight Permits. 2019-14 Temporary Borrowing Bylaw. 2019-15 Appointment to Committees of Council. Any discussion or comment? Clerk Chaperon.
Thank you. And just for clarification, the terms of reference for the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the Cultural Activities and Heritage Planning and Development, these bylaws may come back for revision depending on if council selects the appointment of one member versus two. So these will stand as is, but may come back for amendment at a future meeting.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Next, we have a confirmatory bylaw mover and seconder, please. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Moore. That the bylaw 219-16 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council, the regular meeting held on January 23rd, 2019, listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And adjournment, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Moore, Councillor Hanna. That the regular meeting of Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 8:40 to meet again at the regular meeting on February 6, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the council chambers, Administrative Center in Minising. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for tuning in.